Now we're live.
All right.
We had a little technical difficulties. This is Marion Dane Bauer, who I affectionately like to call Mom. I am her daughter. I will be remaining off camera. But she is here to talk about her new book, Sunshine, which was published just today.
And here it is with its beautiful jacket.
And why don't you first just tell us a little bit about Sunshine? What is the book about?
Sunshine is the story of a boy who is well past the age for having an imaginary friend who's living his life with an imaginary dog in it. And that's where I began. How fun it would be to write a story in which this boy has a very tactile relationship with a dog that isn't really there. And to play with readers' minds in that kind of way so that on the page the dog would seem so real. And yet the reader would know, even while it was feeling real on the page, that the dog wasn't real. And that's what I started with. But that's just a situation. It's not a story. To have a story, you have to have struggle. You have to have your character struggling to accomplish something, to change something, to move something. And so the first question I had to answer before I could write the story was, why is an older kid? I don't name his age because my various readers had great difficulty agreeing on what age he ought to be. And so I finally decided to let the reader decide what age he is. But he's probably somewhere between 9 and 11. Why is this boy still running around with an imaginary dog? Why did he have an imaginary dog to start with? And I came up with the idea of a mother who abandoned him when he was 3 years old, and that the dog has been his substitute for the lost mother without his realizing that. And then the struggle of the story is the struggle of the boy deciding, after all these years of no contact with this mother, who has moved to a remote island in northern Minnesota, for his deciding he wants to see her, he wants to spend a week on the island with her, with the conviction that somehow he can bring her back to the family if he does that.
Our followers are asking you to speak up.
Oh, can you turn the volume up?
I don't know. We'll try that. But okay, where did the idea for Sunshine come from?
The idea for Sunshine came from that imaginary dog. This is that place that I started this. And then it went from there to a sense of loss out of which the story was going to build. And that sense of loss often lies at the core of my stories. And that was that was what I moved into to make the story. My daughter's telling me I'm supposed to look at the camera, not at her. It's hard to talk to someone without looking at them.
How long did it take you to write?
Well, I checked my computer this morning because I got to wondering about that. And I was surprised to discover that the very first draft, a very brief draft, I didn't go very far with it, that I created of Sunshine was in August 2016. So it was 5 years ago that I started it. I didn't get very far with that first draft, as I said. And the reason I didn't get very far is that I hadn't yet answered the question as to why this dog exists, why the boy needs the dog, why any of this was happening. And so the tension of the story was that the father was beginning to feel this boy was too old to be playing this dog game, and was wanting him to get rid of it. And the boy was not wanting to let go of it. But I didn't know why. And so I set it aside. I set it aside for about a year. When I looked at my computer, it reappeared again about August 2017. And then I worked on it for about a year and a half before I finally had it in full shape. And it's been that long ago that it went to the editor, and it's been that long that I've been separated from it until it came out just now.
Wonderful. You say you found yourself in a tangle writing this novel and relied on lots of writer friends. Tell me, how does that process work?
The process of work, I'll say I'm so fortunate to have so many accomplished professional children's writers as friends. Now, a lot of that comes out of having taught at Vermont College of Fine Arts in their program for their Master of Fine Arts in Writing for Children and Young Adults. And I got to know many wonderful writers there. And what happens working with a fellow writer on a manuscript is similar to working with an editor, except that the writer doesn't have the capacity to say, if you fix it in this way, then I'll publish it. They can just give their opinion. But what happens with a good critique is the person doesn't just say, oh, I love it, it's wonderful, because that's no help at all. When someone does that, I say, oh, thank you, that's wonderful. And I don't again show them a manuscript. I wait until they have a finished book and take it to them, and then they can say, oh, that's wonderful, all they like, and it pleases me. But when I'm in manuscript stage, I need help. I need people to step in and find the places that aren't working. I don't want anyone, even an editor, when I get to an editor, to fix something for me. I don't want them to rewrite. I don't want them to tell me how to do it. What I want them to say is, this is working for me, and this isn't working for me. And this is why this part isn't working for me. And then I can go back in myself and find my place in the story and move forward. I had one friend, Ellen Howard, a very wonderful children's writer, who read the manuscript and said at one point, there was a key scene where Ben has gone off in his mother's canoe without having gotten permission, gotten in a fair amount of trouble, come back much later than he should have. And when he's so excited and relieved to come back, and he comes around the corner of the cabin, and she grabs him and says, where in the hell have you been? And it was a powerful moment, and I loved that moment. And Ellen said very quietly, I'm not sure this mother would have reacted that way. And it was exactly what I did not want to hear, because I loved that moment so much, but I was having difficulty moving on from that moment. And so I backed up and thought about it and thought, I think she's right. I think this mother would have been so engaged in what she was doing, which in her case was happened to be writing, that she wouldn't have noticed he was gone longer than he should have been. And she would have offended him far more deeply than an anger could have offended him by not having noticed that he was gone and in trouble. And that recast the story for me in a wonderful way and gave me the way to move on from that particular moment in the story. Writer friends are the world's greatest blessing.
Sorry, my son's trying to get me to pick him up from school, and I'm explaining to him that I can't do that right now. We actually have someone who asked a good question. Did you have to make any major changes after the editor saw it?
No, I didn't. By the time I got it to the editor, because I'd been through all these wonderful editors before she saw it was pretty much set. And so she had some small things and some concern about the ultimate audience kind of things that we went through, and but there were no deep changes at that point.
So, bringing up your audience, since you're writing for young people, do you focus on your audience while you're writing?
Actually, I don't, pardon me, I don't focus on my audience. I focus instead on my young character. And in focusing on my young character, I am ultimately through that character reaching my audience. I did have in this story, though, a moment when I stepped back and thought about the audience in a way I don't usually. And that is in the first draft of the story, Ben didn't want to go see his mother. His mother decided she wanted him to come, and he was angry. And he was legitimately angry. She had abandoned him all these years before, and now here she wanted him there. And what did he care? And what one evening, I happened to watch a film in which a mother was ill and there were two children, one very young who was very loving toward the mother and very responsive, and a 13-year-old who was so angry she could hardly spit. And it was perfectly legitimate that the 13-year-old would have been as angry as she was. And I, as an adult, knew that. And I, as an adult, watched it. And I despised that 13-year-old girl. I couldn't stand being around her for one more minute. And I suddenly realized that's what I was doing. I had this angry boy from beginning to end. And who was going to want to take the ride with him? And so I backed up and started over again and changed the premise so he wanted to be there. He was the one who wanted it. Because when someone wants something, you're with them in the wanting. When they don't want something and are pushing it away, after a while you feel pushed away. So in that way, I was thinking precisely about my audience, but I was only thinking about my audience through myself and my own reaction. So I was thinking about my audience in a larger way.
Kirkus said in a review of Sunshine, richly character-driven, immersive, evocative, and painfully sad. Talk about presenting painfully sad dramatic material for your young readers.
Painfully sad stories are sometimes controversial for young readers. Adults have a way of wanting to protect children, understandably. I think often when adults are trying to protect children, especially against the emotional experiences, they're really protecting themselves because they don't want to have to deal with it themselves. And if the child is dealing with it, they're going to be drawn into the dealing. But I have very strong feelings about it. We need all kinds of stories. We need fun stories. We need very heady kind of stories that are challenging to think about. We need sad stories. And what a story does, and the very power of story, is that it engages, fiction is the one opportunity we ever have to climb inside someone else's skin, to look out at the world through their eyes, to think with their thoughts, to hear with their ears, to feel with their feelings. And we participate fully. Brain science recently has told us if you're reading and someone runs, the part of your brain that lights up when you run lights up. We participate that fully. And we participate that fully in the emotions too. But it's a safe participation. If someone is grieving in a story, you feel the grief, but it isn't as though you have experienced the same loss the character has. You're experiencing it from a safe distance. And you go through that emotional process with the character. And if there's resolution for the character, there's resolution for you at the end. Aristotle called that a purging of pity and fear. And that is, I think, precisely what happens in a sad story. And sad stories extend our humanity. They give us all more depth, all more awareness of ourselves in the world.
That's wonderful. Does that mean I can read about working out and I've actually worked out?
Wouldn't it be nice
I
if we
know.
worked that fully?
I'm like, oh, I think you're onto something. But clearly, Sunshine is about the power of imagination. Of course, writers live by imagination. But what is it you find yourself wanting to say about the subject now?
It's an interesting question because I'm involved in another novel now. I'm about 2/3 of the way through it. And I didn't realize, as I've mentioned, there's about a 2-year hiatus between when I finished working with the manuscript of Sunshine and when the book came out. When I got my first copy of Sunshine, I did what I always do, and that's within a few days I sat down and read it through because I haven't seen it for a couple of years. That will probably be the last time I read it. But reading it through, then I discover it anew. And what I discovered was that what it should have been perfectly obvious to me, that in my new novel, I'm writing about the same topic. I'm writing about imagination. My new novel is called Just Jenny, and it's about a girl who has lots of dreams, lots of wonderful things going through her mind that her family, no one around her shares. She's really kind of isolated with them. And one night rather, a fairy godmother climbs through her wall and tells her she can choose a dream she wants to come true. So she chooses to have angel wings. And suddenly we're dealing with this girl who has physical wings. She's never dealt with the reality of physical wings. And moreover, they're physical wings that no one can see except her. And so we're back to the imaginary dog, except it's become even more concrete this time. I think what that comes out of for me is that I have always been convinced that we create our own lives in our minds, and that it's what we do with what happens. It isn't what happens to us, it's what we do with it. So, there's a pandemic, and we can respond to that pandemic in all kinds of ways. And it's the way we choose to process it that's going to make the ultimate difference as to how we come through the other side. Uh, and the older I get, the more convinced I am that that the ultimate reality is the reality we each create in our own minds.
Someone asked for you to talk about the cover. Explain the cover.
Okay, the cover is Ben with the canoe, his mother's canoe, and this is his mother's cabin. But can you see the image that the artist has put all of that in? It's the image of the dog. It's the image of the little Cavalier King Charles Spaniel.
I'm just kind of like, it's there, but it's not there.
It's there, but it's not there. And I had thought, when I knew, of course, there would be a jacket and the artist would create it, and I had thought, how is he going to deal with an imaginary dog? How is he going to possibly show this dog? And I think he chose a perfect way to do it.
Mhm.
Since we're talking about that, why don't I read a brief passage?
Yeah,
Would this
that's
be
a great
good time to do that? It's such a layered book, there aren't very many places to dip into it and read. But we've talked a lot about the dog, and the dog is important. The dog actually is based on a dog I used to own, a Ruby Cavalier King Charles Spaniel. And she was still alive when I was writing this. She died during the time I was writing it. And it was such a pleasure to me to recreate her time and time again. So this is just this is the first introduction to Sunshine, and it's the kind of thing I did to bring this dog alive on the page. Ben is waiting for his mother to show up. He's coming in a canoe to take him to her cabin, and he's sitting on the dock with his father next to him. And inside his mind, he says, "She's sure going to be glad to see me, Sunshine. I know she will." Ben doesn't give voice to the words. He doesn't need to. His little dog hears his every thought. Casually, so as not to call attention to what he's doing, he drops his hand to Sunshine's soft fur. Then he looks down, startled. His hand rests on the rough boards of the dock. Sunshine isn't there. Where is she? He'd been so excited about seeing his mother, he's forgotten her entirely. Has he thought about her even once since they got out of the car? As always happens, though, the instant he calls her to mind, Sunshine is there. Not next to him this time, but running toward him down the rickety dock. Her long ears fly, her reddish gold fur gleams, her paws splay happily in every direction. The sight of that galumphing run warms Ben's belly. Sunshine slides to a stop next to him, plops her butt down, and smiles her sweet doggy smile. "Don't worry," the smile says. "I'm here. You know I'm always here."
I think that's lovely. Well, thank you, Mom. And I think this was wonderful. If anyone has any last questions, we can have time to take a few questions. Otherwise, we will wrap up.
I hope people have been able to hear me.
It was Terry that said he couldn't hear you, and I asked. He said he turned his speakers up, and it was fine. So it was operator error on his part.
All right, that's the son-in-law.
Well, thank you, Mom. Again, I think this was wonderful. I'm very excited about Sunshine and all the reviews that have been pouring in on it. They're very, very positive, and it's going to be fun to see where it goes.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Bye.